And as you get started, and it might be different for you, and you can give us the comparison between going into Boston and having the 2 years in the Cardinal organization. A lot of times when a GM Hobo gets the new job, you're drinking from a fire hose. Has it been that way since you took over the helm here?
To some degree. I mean, that's just the nature of it. This is a busy time of year in the front office, regardless, like even if you're not new to the role. But it's different because I've had a couple years to get to know the organization, get to know the people, and that makes a big difference. You're not trying to come in here and just figure out who everybody is and where everything is. And because of that, I think there's some things that I was able to get going really right now that normally you might have to be in the organization for a year or two before you figure it out. So hopefully that will help us down the road.
And I know you guys have had a ton of meetings leading up to the general managers meetings next week in Vegas. What would you like to accomplish next week?
Well, next week, hopefully, will be when the offseason, the player portion of the offseason really kind of kicks off in earnest. I think increasingly in our industry, teams are so preoccupied with a lot of staffing and infrastructure stuff in October, if they're not fortunate enough to still be playing, that really usually there's not a ton of action that happens prior to getting the GM meetings. And that's kind of a reset for everybody to start talking to other clubs. We get to all see each other, get to reconnect, get to connect on priorities. We've already started having those conversations with the other 29 clubs. But next week, I expect is when we'll start to flesh them out and really separate what's real from what's not. So really looking forward to doing that. And then also just continuing to work on the flow of how we all work together, myself and our AGMs. Because, obviously we all know each other at this stage, but in terms of how we're going to work together with me in this seat, the more that we get that good flow going, the more that we can be responsive in the way we need to be to opportunities that are out there.
Yeah, the name of the meetings are the general managers meetings. You just mentioned your AGMs. Are you going to have a general manager of the Cardinals at some point?
I expect we will at some point. I don't know if that's going to happen this offseason or not. I do think, you fast forward a long way, you look ahead multiple years, I do think we will. But at the moment, there were some other things that I really wanted to focus on and tackle in terms of our staffing with this organization. So we've focused on those, but I do expect at some point we'll fill that role.
And I want to ask about the two newest guys. Joe Douglas is your director of pro acquisition. What's that job description like? What is Joe's job going to be?
Yeah, really, it's about putting us and me ultimately in position to make great decisions on free agents and on other teams' players. There's so much that goes into that. He will oversee our pro scouts, but there's more than scouting that flows into these decisions. It's all the information we have at hand, and not just the information, but how does that information come together so that we have the right valuations on players so we can target the right guys and make the right decisions in real time. And there's a lot that goes into that now. When you think about the competition in our industry to do that well, which of course 30 teams are trying to do that well, there's a lot of work, there's a lot of process that goes into it. More often than not, you have a good process, you're going to make more good decisions. So he's really in charge of that process and teeing that up for our senior leadership team and ultimately me to be able to make those good decisions.
Okay, so you're a veteran baseball man. You watch a lot of ball. You know a lot of players. How often does it happen, though, that you get information and you think a player is either really good or average and you say, didn't know that? Does that happen very often for you?
It does happen. It should happen because there's so much on these guys. Now, you're usually not going to look at someone who's an all-star and say, wait, I didn't realize this guy's the worst player in the league. That's not how it works. It's usually those little marginal things. But when you're talking about, those guys that you can pick up and under the radar moves that end up becoming, big time guys for your club, or you're talking about prospects where there's a lot of years between when you get them and when they impact your team, those little things add up. All it takes is one of those guys to pop and it can transform your organization. So there's really a lot that goes into that. And sometimes, these things always come down to splitting hairs, and you want to make sure you end up on the right side of those decisions.
Then your other new hire is Jacob Buffa, St. Louisan, who's your senior director of international scouting. That's pretty self-explanatory, but I asked you this in your press conference because I think it's a really big deal, and I know you do too. The international pool is really important for a franchise like the Cardinals, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's been the case, throughout the years, and Moy and his group have done a lot of good work there throughout the years. The organization's had plenty of real standout international players come through and help this organization win going back decades, and certainly recently as well. And it's always going to be a big part. If you're going to win with a core that you build from within, the international market has to be a big part of that. You're not going to be able to have an elite core, one that can compete with the best in the league, unless you're maximizing that arena.
And Chaim, you guys are not going to be able to swim in the waters of getting people like Otani or Soto. And you look at the past. I mean, Cleveland has a Jose Ramirez. The Blue Jays got Guerrero. The Nationals, when they won the World Series, had Soto and Robles. The Reds have De La Cruz. We could go on and on, but that's a great fertile ground to find a star player that's hard to get if you don't have a top 10 pick and hard to get if you don't have the money to sign free agents.
Yeah, look, if you want to win consistently, it doesn't matter what your payroll is. You have to do well with your talent pipeline. That's especially true for the Cardinals because of some of the reasons you said. It's how the Cardinals have always won. So that's a huge part of it. You'd always rather grow your own stars than have to go out and buy them. Obviously, there's a lot that comes along with that, and you'd always rather have those guys come up and grow them yourself and get the entirety of their primes yourself. And so if you want to do that, you have to be able to do that in every arena to find and develop talent.
Hey, I want to know from an industry standpoint, a couple of years ago when Houston won the World Series with a bunch of international guys that they had scouted after they had turned 16, which I thought was a really interesting inefficiency, by the way, in the process. But is that something that you or if you know other teams are doing, is scouting international players now beyond their 16th or 17th birthdays?
Yeah, for sure. There are guys that slip through the cracks for whatever reason. The Astros did an incredible job of cornering that market a number of years ago. That's just the nature of the competition in that area. It's really true everywhere, but obviously the international system, just because of the way that it is a little bit more of a Wild West. You have teams scratching and clawing, doing everything possible to try to find that next advantage, do something a little bit different from the competition that can result in pulling in more talent. I cannot overemphasize for our fans who don't really necessarily get to see what that's like behind the curtain, how intense that competition is in every area. Organizations burning the midnight oil, scratching, clawing, doing everything they can just to get small advantages because they add up over time. It's really just like what happens on the field. You do the little things right, those add up over 162, and that's usually the difference between getting in and not if you have the requisite talent level. There are 30 front offices that are full of really talented and bright people. It's all about how we scratch out those little advantages, and then they compound over time.